Welcome, my romance friends, to Confessions of a Closet Romantic. This is your little shame-free romantic recess where we have fun looking at the best romantic TV shows, movies, and books on a different theme each episode. Let's gush. This is Poppy, and in this episode, Advice Column Romance Part 1.
Okay, Kristen, let's kick this episode off by sharing what we're road testing.
Let's do it. And when I say do it, I really mean it because we are going to have sex every day with our partners.
When the cultures around the world are in upheaval, including especially mine, I like to look for wise, grounded women writers and smart stories that explore different ways to think about relationships. Like Heather Havrilesky's Ask Polly columns and Cheryl Strayed's Ask Sugar. These smart women have also written memoirs, and the compassion and insight and wisdom in their online columns are like a chapter in the best self-help book, combined with the drama of the most addictive reality show. Advice like this takes me out of myself for a short while, gives me confidence, and helps me explore my own challenges with the ups and downs of relationship. And let's face it, anytime two or more humans get together, there are going to be ups and downs in how they relate. So this advice, reading about other people's challenges and sorting through my own, it's like a balm for my soul. So in the next couple of episodes, I'm going to explore the best badass female advice columnists working today, and I'll also find that same vibe in stories and shows and other writing. I'll interview the hosts of a new romance advice podcast, a romance opinion essayist for Book Riot. I'll take a look at the contemporary romance The X Talk, which is about a public radio advice show, and rewatch the 90s rom-com classic The Truth About Cats and Dogs, a Cyrano de Bergerac retelling set around a California radio pet advice show. First up, Romance Road Test.
I'm Kristen Meinzer.
And I'm Jolenta Greenberg.
We're two women who've been in long-term relationships with our husbands for a combined total of more than 17 years.
We've had our ups and our downs, and now we're ready to shake things up.
Every episode, we'll try a popular relationship enhancer on for size to see what happens.
And you're invited to join us and decide what you might want to try at home.
This is Romance Road Test.
This fabulous new podcast is a spin-off of the long-running By the Book podcast, where friends Kristen Meisner, an audio producer who's worked for NPR, and Jolenta Greenberg, a New York-based comedian and pop culture commentator, live by a different self-help book each episode to see which ones might be life-changing. On Romance Road Test, they try out romantic relationship enhancing ideas with their partners along for the ride, like complimenting each other, reading erotica out loud to each other, sharing a hobby, or having sex every day.
Kristen, you steamy temptress, let's kick things off by telling our listeners what we're about to road test.
Yes, let's do it. Today, we're going to read erotica to and with our partners, you sexy beast, Jolenta.
Oh my God. Erotica is just what it sounds like. Literature that stimulates your erotic imagination with steamy stories, characters, and scenarios. Many people read it on their own, but reading it with a partner has its own benefits. According to Jamie Bell, author of All the Dirty Little Things, doing so can create a safe space for expressing sexuality, exploring curiosities, and promoting communication around safe, healthy, vibrant sex that all parties involved are happy with.
Not sure where to start? Sex columnist Miss Annabelle suggests finding something in a genre that speaks to you. Then, try things out in an intimate setting where you both feel comfortable and open. Consider wearing something that turns you on. It could be as simple as a sexy outfit for one of you and a suit for the other. If you're feeling nervous, try having the listener wear a blindfold. If you're feeling inspired, tease and touch each other as you read or explore some role-playing. There's no right or wrong. The important thing is to be open, enjoy the words, and have fun.
It is such a funny and smart show, so I needed to get the scoop immediately from these brave and funny oversharers and hesitant advice givers. And I'm dying to know how Romance Road Test came about.
Well, over the years, Jolenta and I have had so many people write in, probably every week, saying, we want more of Brad and Dean. We love all the interactions that happen in your marriages. We love seeing the husbands be exasperated by dumb self-help advice, and we love to see it when there are moments of tenderness between you as couples. So we thought, what's a way to give the listeners more of what they want? And we figured, why not just try to live by some of those relationship hacks? There are so many of them that show up on TikTok, on YouTube, in women's magazines, all the time in women's magazines, on blogs, on listicles, and so on. So why not just enlist some of those and apply them to our relationships? It'll be a lot easier than slogging through a 500-page self-help book each week. It'll be something where we don't have to force our husbands to read a 500-page self-help book. It'll just be something quick and actionable, something we can hopefully do in one afternoon or at the very most in, maybe a week.
Right. Okay, so I know, Kristen, you write romance as well as read romance, right?
I have written an
yes,
Amish
she
romance
does.
novel, and I have an abandoned book right now that is a Christmas mystery romance that I do plan to eventually go back to, but I'm about 2/3 the way through writing that book as well.
Okay, this is fantastic. Obviously, this is a romance podcast, but I've realized that romance means different things to different people. And I wonder if when you started Romance Road Test, were you both kind of reluctant and scoffing, or were you kind of totally buying into it?
Ooh, good question. I'd say for me, I can't speak for Kristen. It was about 50-50 because some of the advice was stuff I was like, oh, I think this will be good for us. Or I've been meaning to do this forever. Or like, oh my gosh, that sounds so sweet. And then the other half were like, all right, sure. Like, all right, internet, let's do this.
Right.
So I'd say 50-50, like super excited and skeptical. Kristen, I'm not sure about you.
Well, I'm very mixed because there's a part of me that very, very, very much is, a romantic. I love romantic comedies. I love romance novels. I love romance, but I'm also very skeptical of it. And I also think that it's been marketed to us as women a little too hard, a little too ubiquitously everywhere in the world of like, that's what you need is a man to love you and it'll be love at first sight. And there are such narrow ideas of how love can come about and what love should feel like and what a relationship should look like. And so that's where my skepticism comes in. And I'm like, I don't know. Some of the greatest loves I've ever had in my life have been my friendships or my love for my Nana. And so sometimes I think that we put way too much emphasis on romantic love, even though, I love romantic love. I love watching a romance story. I love reading a romance story. But there's definitely that skepticism in there and a little bit of frustration, if not outright anger, at the way that women are supposed to be completed by romance in a way that men aren't told that they have to be.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I wonder too, did you two feel like, oh, our relationships don't really need any help. This will just be a fun little experiment. We'll try it for the laughs.
I mean, the first one we did where we just recreate our first dates, I thought it was just going to be sort of like go through the motions, like, ha ha, we were so silly. But every step of the way, it was like, oh, what even is our first date? Because we, were friends who started hooking up and then started dating like a year later. And so we sort of decided like let's like let's recreate like our first hookup night and our first date. So like mush them together. And then got to, talk about what groceries we needed and like reminisce about a frozen pizza and like, you know, I was like swooning in the freezer aisle while we got like an organic frozen pizza because it was the same one we picked up like the first night we hooked up. And I'm like, how is this happening? But it was a nice reminder that just sort of like little tiny things can bring about big emotions, can remind you like why you fell for someone and can sort of like help reconnect you. And this was something I thought was just going to be like, sure, whatever. Like we recreated it. Like we ate a pizza.
Yeah. Well, I think Kristen said, wait, Jolenta, you remember the brand of the pizza, which I just giggled. One thing I really love is that you two have such a beautiful rapport. You're very smart. You're fun loving. So it's so enjoyable to listen to both of you, but also in your summary of these activities really digs deep and sometimes kind of brought me close to tears. And I think the first date one was the one where I thought, oh my gosh, I started thinking about my ex-husband. Can I even remember our first date? And then, so it's a beautiful blend of so many different tones. And when you all set out to do the show, was that a deliberate thing or is it just a thing that comes out of your friendship naturally?
Well, I would say that, Romance Road Test is kind of a sequel or a spin-off show to By the Book. By the Book was Jolenta's idea. And Jolenta, at the time when she came up with the idea, she was fascinated with self-help books. She wanted to believe their promises. She wanted me along for the ride because I was a critic. I'm still a critic. And she knew that I wasn't so keen on self-help books. And so in my mind, when we started By the Book, I really saw it as kind of like, oh, this is a chance for me to snark on this thing, which I think puts all the onus on the individual when so much of why we're suffering and unhappy has to do with institutional or structural reasons or things that have nothing to do with us. And so I really thought that By the Book would be just like, I'm making snarky comments. And then what happened very early on in By the Book is it turned out to be so much more than that because genuinely focusing on oneself, on one's history, on one's daily struggles, it's hard for emotion not to come through. It's hard for vulnerability not to bubble up. And in some cases, tears. Like, I think we were only like 3 episodes in, and I broke down crying in one of the episodes. And so I got to give credit to Jolenta for that, though, because Jolenta, you've always been very vulnerable in all of your storytelling. You've always been willing to go there. You've always been willing to have the shaky voice while you tell the painful story. And I wasn't that person before we made By the Book, but it definitely came out in By the Book and became, one of the main parts of the show, which any future listeners, that's not to say the show is just depressing and melodramatic. It's not. It's a very funny show. But I think that Romance Road Test just naturally built on that and has, just as much, if not more, depth along with the humor because, there's different kinds of dynamics at play that can create even more opportunities for depth. We're talking about 2 long-term relationships that have now, at this point, added up to over 20 years together.
Yeah. And Kristen, I tell you, I listened to the hobby episode of Romance Road Test and first of all, Jolenta, one of my favorite moments
love that one.
Brad, purple, 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 you. No, it was just hilarious. It's like, I get this thing and I could feel you being like, yeah, dude, I've been at this and this is like a skill and do not belittle the skill. Okay. But he was so sweet in that scene and it was so enjoyable. But then Kristen, I was like feeling your apprehension about the dang computer game. And then when you both so honestly looked at that audio like, oh, and then it devolved into this, and I was like, wow, you guys don't shy away from what ends up happening.
You chose a hobby that has to do with computers.
Oh, Of course he did, Jolenta. You know he did. He decided he was going to introduce me to a video game.
Oh, no. You don't like video games.
No, I mean, I have a very fraught relationship with them. Those first-person games always make me motion sick. The only video game I ever liked in my life, I developed such an addiction to, it was Tetris, that friends and family even had to intervene because I stopped eating and going to the bathroom because I was so obsessed with the game. So
this sounds like just an all-around horrible idea then.
Yeah, it seemed like a horrible idea to me too. But I will say this, Dean did try to choose a game that he thought would appeal to me.
Well, I know you love real estate, so I wanted to show you this computer game that I thought you might enjoy.
Am I going to get motion sick?
Oh, no.
Am I going to get addicted?
I neither confirm nor deny that.
Hold on, am I going to do it or are you going to do it and I'm watching you?
Here, you sit here and I'll sit there.
Okay, what should I do here?
Well, what do you think you do?
2 to 4 stories.
Wow. Okay. It's a fantasy game. There's no need to be so,
Thinking about how the humans are going to live in there?
Yeah, there's no humans. It's really interesting. Almost any computer gamer in the world, the very first thing they would have done is like, how high can I build? What happens if I build and then take out the middle floor? Like most gamers that I know would be exploring the mechanics of all of this.
So you're saying that I'm not doing it right?
Are you both kind of rooting for an outcome where both you and your partners loved the exercise, or do you feel you're pretty open to a negative outcome?
I personally, I can't speak for you, Jolenta. I like to go in open to anything. I really want to be as honest and transparent as possible and not sugarcoat things. That being said, I do have, the kind of world outlook and personality where I want things to go for the best. I really do. It's not like I'm, just standing back as a passive observer, like whatever happens, happens. There is a part of me in my heart that wants things to go well. But I'm also not going to try and manipulate it if things are going badly, and I'll be honest about it if they're not going so well, which in many episodes, they don't go well for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we go in, especially with Romance Road Test, I think we both felt like a bit more hopeful because you always want things to be fun, on a date or in an intimacy exercise and failing at it or not failing at it, but it not going well can feel like failing something as a couple as opposed to individual self-help. It's easier for me to be that doesn't vibe with me. But if it's an exercise that's supposed to build togetherness and we start fighting, it's is the exercise flawed or are we flawed? There are more variables. Of not stopping and noticing what we appreciate about each other as often as we should. We tend to go off in our own worlds, and sometimes we have trouble coming back together, especially Brad. So I thought I would try to lead by example and give Brad a compliment every hour all day long.
Ooh, I like this approach, Jolenta. And did Brad know you were doing this?
No, he did not, Kristen. I wanted to see if he would notice. I wanted to see if he would return the compliments. I just generally wanted to see what would happen.
Oh, I am intrigued.
And it started off simple enough. First, I woke him up with a compliment. You're the cutest sleeper in the world.
What?
You're the cutest sleeper in the world.
Okay, thank you.
You look like a baby, but also a lumberjack.
Okay, let me keep sleeping then.
I love you, lumber baby.
Why are you waiting up to tell me?
Okay. I love you.
I love you. Okay.
I gotta say, if I'm being woken up ahead of my time, Jolenta, I might not even notice a compliment myself. So I can see where Brad's coming from here.
Yeah, no, it was Saturday morning. He was sleeping in after a long, busy week. I don't think he was really awake enough or aware enough to appreciate the compliment.
I mean, I wondered too, what was the most surprising thing both of you found out by doing Romance Road Test? Or have I just not gotten to that episode yet?
Oh, the most surprising thing.
Most surprising.
I mean, one thing I thought was kind of surprising was just a difference between me and Jolenta. And, I have always believed there's no right or wrong way to be in a relationship. It's whatever works with the 2 consenting or 3 or 5 consenting people who are in that relationship, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I do sometimes think it's funny listening back on those episodes. When we were making them, it was a fever pitch. It was, week after week after week for like 4 months at a time. Every single week we were working on this show, going on our dates, putting ourselves emotionally out there. But now that enough time has passed, listening back to those episodes, it's fun to just hear how Jolenta and Brad and Dean and I are so different. Almost every episode, and this was not planned, you'll hear that if the date went really well for Brad and Jolenta, it probably didn't go well for me and Dean, and vice versa. And none of that was planned. And somebody asked me recently, did you write the episode so that you two would always have a different kind of reaction than Jolenta and Brad? And I'm like, no, we did not plan that. We would show up on our taping days and be genuinely delighted and surprised and sometimes horrified by what happened to the other couple versus ourselves.
Oh my gosh. I think I swear this is one thing I really love about it too, Kristen, when you were like, and Jolenta pointed this out, the afterward audio, you were so sweet and happy and upbeat about the ice dancing. And I remember when you started saying, okay, I love live theater, so I think we should go to, I was like, oh no, I felt like I knew where it was going to go.
Sound enthused.
He was not enthused. But then when we got to the outdoor venue, this happened and Dean perked right up. Oh my God, Jay! Oh my God,
Oh my goodness!
How are you guys? I feel like I haven't seen. Those are our friends Jay and Kate, and Jay is such a dude's dude that Dean thought, hey, if Jay is choosing to go to this kind of show, maybe it's not going to be so bad. So he perked up, and then we sat down in our seats, and he whipped out the flask that he brought in that had wine in it, and we sipped it, and we held hands, and the lights went down, and we took in the show. And I got to say, I was having a great time. But when the intermission time came, it became clear that maybe Dean and I weren't on the same page. So, what do you think so far?
Well, I mean, I like the ASMR sound of the blades on the ice, I guess, but the music totally sounds like Valheim to me.
The video game you play all the time?
Well, I don't play it all the time, but yes, the one that I play to relax.
Are you finding the skating relaxing at all?
I mean, I guess it's okay. It's kind of repetitive, and there's a lot of skating in circles, but not really anything I'm going to remember tomorrow.
Based on my research, it's going to get much more exciting in the second half.
Well, that's awesome, because the most exciting thing we've heard so far is that guy with his boombox wandering around out there, and the weird-ass music he's playing, or the occasional honk on a horn.
You were like skipping off to the show, and you were so excited, and I was like, I think I know what's going to happen, and this is terrible. So I just love how you two, the intimacy between you two as friends, and then your partners being involved and the vulnerability of that, and then us listening and just seeing that you're just laying it all out there and you're just going to see what happens. That makes for such good podcasting. Like, so when you started out, did you feel any kind of strong emotion about the self-help or giving advice, even though you guys just do it tacitly? You're not ever prescribing in your episodes, I don't feel. You're just laying it out. Here was our experience, take from this what you will. But did you ever hesitate that you might be seen as experts, even though you're trying to be critical of a genre that presents itself as expert?
I think this question is so funny because I'm not sure if you know this, but Jolenta and I did eventually write a book called How to Be Fine. And How to Be Fine is really just distilling what worked for us, what didn't, and what we wish more self-help books had in them. And we wrote that after we lived by 50 books on Buy the Book. We're like, let's write this book about it. It's funny because we try to make clear in the book and on our show, it's like, we're not here to tell you how to live your life. We're just telling you what worked for us or what didn't. We're saying what we think is wrong with the industry. We're saying what, good little nuggets might come out of the industry. But Jolenta, we do give advice sometimes. We do. But anytime we give advice, I think we do try to always make clear, like, just because it worked for me doesn't mean it'll work for you. And the advice we're giving is based on our own histories, our own identities. It's based on lots of things, the family structures we grew up in, the access or non-access to money and education we had growing up. So we will, give some advice, but we always try to make clear, like, any advice we're giving is completely informed by our own specific worldviews and who we are. But oftentimes we're not giving advice, we're just telling our stories.
That's a power of the show, because it's sort of like, let's just try this on for size this episode. Let's try this on for size. And I guess that kind of skepticism and, we have to try things out to see if they fit us. If you all are doing a kind of based on self-help podcast, do you, as you produce it, do you ever dream of something different in the genre to get your teeth into? Like, do you ever say to yourself, I wish there was a self-help book written from this perspective or on this topic?
Ooh, I have lots of wishes, but not too many
Okay.
plans. Well, and I think we're starting to see more and more of these types of books every year. But I've really liked books that talk about community and like social structures and how we as individuals can impact them or join a cause or help dismantle an institution, and like things that are just more informative about like how the world around us is working and what we can do within those structures. Things that are less focused on the individual and more about like self-help with an impact on a group, hopefully.
Because this is a romance podcast, I wonder if we can leave people, like, I know you two do not want to prescribe, but if you were going to take one thing to say to people about romance, relationship, connection, love, any kind of love from Romance Road Test, what would you say is the best thing that each of you have learned from the process of doing that podcast?
I guess for me, especially bringing my experiences sort of back to Kristen and comparing notes, sort of what Kristen said earlier, learning that like if something is supposed to work and doesn't, like you're not doomed. And like learning, what works for one couple, like doesn't have to work for you to like still be happy and in love and functioning.
Oh, I really like that, because it is very easy, just like parenthood, motherhood, just to get sucked into the idea
Right.
of this is canon, the way it must go. And if you deviate, you couldn't possibly be doing it right. Like, yeah, do you all feel when you go through these experiences, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm doing life right? Do you ever have that kind of crisis?
Every once in a while, yeah.
The books want us to think that. The self-help gurus want us to think we're doing everything wrong, because if we weren't doing things wrong, why would we buy their books and then buy their sequels and then buy their seminars, right? They want to convince us that we're broken so they can fix us. But to go back to your question of, what have I learned from Romance Road Test? I would say just like the importance of being open. And by that, I mean, open to change, open to new ways to discover ourselves and our partners and ways we can interact with them. And Jolenta and I are at a certain point in our relationships that, isn't usually covered in a romance novel. There's always like the meet cute, the fall in love, the get married, or the, possibly the later in life thing where, oh, we're going to go off on a new adventure to a retirement community. Occasionally there's some of that. Occasionally, there's how does having a baby disrupt your family? And that's kind of a romance trope too. But there aren't a lot of stories focusing on people just like me and Jolenta. And guess what? Our stories are worth telling too. And we also can evolve, and we also can find new ways to relate to our partners. And we can find new ways to be open with each other. So I'd say that, Romance Road Test really kind of hammered that point home for me of like, there are things to learn at all times. And there's not just one moment of romance in coupledom. And it's not just at the beginning, and it's not just at the end, and it's not just when there's a baby. There are so many other points too.
I am so on board with that. I have loved having you two here. Thank you so much for answering all these questions about Romance Road Test. I adore that podcast so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, I had such a good time talking to these wonderful podcasters. Tune in next time for part 2, all about advice on the screen and on the radio. If you enjoy this podcast, leave a review or tell a friend about it. A special hello to listeners in India and the UK. For more information and show notes, visit confessionsofaclosetromantic.com. Until next time, my advice is romance starts with loving ourselves. So give yourself a big old hug today.